area's like. This area was the first bit of the East End to be sort of redeveloped and gentrified and trendified about 20 years ago, right? So it's full of bars, nightlife, artists and things like that. Back in the 1880s, it was anything but. It was Whitechapel's evil twin, you know, with worse characters, worse crime, worse lodging houses, worse problems, to be honest with you. Despite all those changes, if you'd have stood here back in the day and looked round, you'd see all this, right? Spitalfields Market over there dates from 1887. Pub on the corner, 54. And Christchurch, one of the most famous buildings in East London, it's been here since 1729. So the old buildings are still around if you know where to look for them. Don't look over there though, because it does ruin everything. It really does. Now, several of the victims of the Whitechapel murders lived in this neighbourhood, right? The one important one we're going to talk about now, Annie Chapman, widely regarded as second. Again, it's the same old story. Her marriage to her husband John Chapman, a Windsor coachman, was very much troubled by her heavy drinking, the problems associated with it. She had 3 children. Actually, she had more than 3 children. She had about 11, but only 3 of them survived the birth. They reckon it's because of that health issue. The family, of course, fell to pieces in the early 1880s, and that tragic marriage just disintegrated. But for a little while at least, John Chapman gave his ex-wife 10 shillings a week just to keep her going, I suppose, until his own death in 1886 of cirrhosis of the liver. The money's dried up. That's when we believe Annie Chapman came here to Spitalfields, obviously living in the lodging houses by necessity, working as a casual prostitute by necessity when times got tough. And funnily enough, the morning she died, the 8th of September, she too had tried to get into her usual lodging house in Dorset Street, but again had spent all her money on alcohol. So she was thrown out. And she turned round and she said, "Don't worry, keep my bed for me, I shall..." Yeah, usual stuff, right? It's very much similar. Unfortunately, the end result was similar as well. Several hours later, this poor lady was found brutally murdered just round the corner in Hanbury Street, which is where we're going next. Now, because of the horror of this crime, believe you me, it was horrific. You'll find out why in a minute. Loads of information about it in the newspapers. Lots of interviews with people who claimed they'd bumped into Annie Chapman at various stages in the hours leading up to her death. One of those stories is worth telling, even though it might not actually be true. Several newspapers claim that Annie Chapman was seen alive and well drinking in that pub on the corner, the 10 Bells, only an hour before she was found dead. Now, if that's a true story, she was probably having her last drink in that pub, right? But we don't know if that was Annie Chapman that the witness saw. It doesn't matter, because that story has given that pub great significance, especially to the tourist industry, right? We actually know Mary Kelly and Elizabeth Stride are documented as drinking in there. And actually, being a local central pub, they probably all did. They probably all would have known it very well. But it is the only pub they used to go to that still looks anything like it did then. As I said earlier on, it dates from the 1850s. And it's therefore become the most famous building in the Ripper story that is still with us. It pops up in things like the London Dungeon and things like this. Several of the movies have it in. And, well, what can I say? In the mid-1970s, it wasn't doing very well. So the owners at the time decided to cash in on its history. And basically, they renamed the pub the Jack the Ripper. Now, what do we make of this? Good or not good? It's not really, is it, when you think about it? It tells you everything you need to know about the 70s. You know, the decade that taste forgot. Because everyone thought that was a bit of fun. The backlash came in the late 1980s, the 100th anniversary, when a lot of people got upset when the pub started selling all sorts of Jack the Ripper t-shirts and blood red drinks and things like that. There was actually a big demonstration and a campaign against it. The 80s were different, weren't they? And we knew what serial killers were by then. So 1988, they changed its name back to the historic 10 Bells, and why not? I mean, there's been a pub on that site with that name certainly since the early 1700s. So let's keep it historic, folks. Anyway, all old round here, that's famous, but the oldest properties you'll go past, and it really does recreate the atmosphere of the times, are these streets you're going to go through now. They're Georgian townhouses. Some of them are nearly 300 years old, and you were asking me what it's like now. If you've got a couple of million burling a hole in your pocket, you can afford one of those, because you've got to be quite well off to live down it, but it's quite atmospheric. Sorry there's no fog, by the way. Can't have everything, can you? Right, this way.